Hi guys, today we're going to talk about section 6.1, the greatest common factor and factor by grouping. So just a few things that we need to know for this section is that this section places a lot of importance on the GCF, which is the greatest common factor, and you need to be able to identify the GCF and also be able to factor it out, different types of GCF. In class we talked about the negative GCFs, the binomial GCFs, so just something that we're going to pay attention and make sure to understand when to use and what to use. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. So let's go ahead and talk about identify the GCF. In class, we did the number 12 and 18, trying to find the greatest common factor. Now, these numbers are small enough that you should be able to tell right away. But what we did in class was that we used a factoring tree. So what I did in class was we started out with 12 and 18. So I asked this class, well, give me two numbers that multiply equal 12 and do not use 1. 1 doesn't do us any good in this case. So most people said 2 times 6, which is okay. And 2 is a prime number, and that is what we're going after. So same idea with 6, right? Which two number multiply equals 6? You got 2 and 3. So from here, we know 12 is 2 times 2 times 3. Same idea with 18. 18, 2 times 9 is 18. And then 9 is 3 times 3. So 18 is 2 times 3 times 3. And from here, now we're looking for something in common. So notice they have a 2 in common. They also have a 3 in common. So the GCF in this case is 2 times 3, which is 6. Okay, notice they have a 2 in common, so it doesn't mean that we have two 2's. Right? When we're talking about GCF, we're not talking about two 2's. We're talking about they have a 2 in common, and they have a 3 in common. So those are what we're considered for GCF. Okay, and the same idea, next problem for 24 and 36. So same thing, right? Which two number multiply give you 24? Let me see it. So we know it's 2 times 12. And 12 I know is 2 times 6. And 6 we know is 2 times 3 from previous. So 24 is 2 times 2 times 2 times 3. 36 is 3 times 12. Or you can do 2 times 18, whichever one you think about first. So I'm just going to do 3 times. I'm going to do 2 times 18 is 36. And the 18 we know is 2 times 9. And 9 is 3 times 3. So 36 is 2 times 2 times 3 times 3. And notice in this case, they have a 2 in common, another 2 in common, and a 3 in common. So the GCF is 2 times 2 times 3, which is 12. Okay. All right, now of course, right? The next problem we did in class, and it's supposed to be 105, 45, and 60. I know the paper said 40, but I made a mistake, so it was supposed to be 45. So which means we're going to do the same thing. Now the numbers are a little bigger, so it's going to make things slightly difficult, but hopefully you'll be able to recognize what's going on. Okay, so here you go. 105, I know 5 works. 5 goes into 105 21 times. And 5 is a prime. And 21 is 3 times 7. And they're both primes, so life is good. 45 is 3 times 15. And 15 is 3 times 5. And 60 is 5 times 12. And 12 is 2 times 6. and 6 is 2 times 3. So what we end up having is 105 is 3 times 5 times 7. 45 is 3 times 3 times 5. And 60 is 2 times 2 times 3 times 5. So notice they all have a 5 in common. They all have a 3 in common. And I think that's all they have. So the GCF is 3 times 5, which is 15. Okay. All right, so that's how you find a GCF for strictly numbers. Now, if you're looking for GCF of a term with a variable, and then that just means that we also got to figure out what's going on in the variable. So let's look at 3x squared and the 6x cubed. Now, I'm gonna write this slightly different just because the numbers are small. I know 3x squared is 3 times x squared, and the x squared is the same as x times x. I know 6x cubed is 6 times x cubed, and the 6 is 2 times 3. And the x cubed is technically x times x times x. So what we end up having is you have 3xx versus 2 times 3 times xx. So let's see what they have in common. Notice they have 3 in common, x in common, another x in common. So the GCF in this case will be 3x squared. Okay. The hint I'm going to give you is that the GCF, when it comes to the letters, you always pick the lowest exponent, right? Because the thing is, you got to remember, when you cannot use what you don't have. So if your lowest exponent is squared, in this case, your greatest common factor has to be the squared. Right? You can't be cubed because one of the terms doesn't have enough x. Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and work on this one, the 28. So we got 28ab squared. You got 7a squared b, and you have 21ab. So I'm gonna work on the 28, 7, and 21. Now, I think in this one is pretty straightforward. You can probably see that 28 is 7 times 4. 7 obviously is 7 times 1. And notice 7 is prime. And the 21 is 7 times 3. So from here, I think we can say the GCF for the number part is just 7. Okay. Now let's look at the letter part. From the 28, you have AB squared. From the 7a squared b, you have AAB. For 21ab, you only have AB. So notice, only thing we have that's in common is B. Actually, I lied. B and A. Okay, they have an A here and they have a B here. So everybody has an A and everybody has a B. So our GCF in this case is just going to be 7AB. Okay, now as far as like what I said, picking the exponent with the lowest number. So remember, A here is the first power, that's the lowest. B is the lowest, so that's why we have AB here. Okay. All right, part F, you have 4ax minus h, and you have negative 9bx minus h. So in this case, I think this one is pretty straightforward. What do they have in common? they both have the x minus h. Now, notice the x minus h is inside the parentheses. So that means we have 4a times the quantity x minus h. We also have negative 9b times the quantity x minus h. So that's why even though x minus h is subtracting, because it's inside the parentheses being multiplied by, it is a factor. So our GCF in this case is just x minus h. All right, so the part G, the 2x squared minus 6x, and the 5x minus 15. Part G we're skipping because in that one it does not fit our question, so we're not doing part G. All right, so now number 3 is the factor out the GCF part. Okay, and the hint I give you here is the opposite of distribute. So to do this one is pretty straightforward. So we start out with 10x plus 25. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to break everything down like what we have been doing above. So 10x is 2 times 5 times x. Plus 25 is 5 times 5. And notice from here, they each have a 5. Here and here. So that means my GCF, in this case, is a 5. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the 5 in the front, put a parentheses, and I'm going to put everything else that's left over inside. So the leftovers is the 2 and x are the leftovers. The plus sign is right here, and the leftover 5. Okay, so when you factor out GCF, it's going to look like some quantity in front of the parentheses, and inside you should be adding or subtracting. Now you can always double check by distribute. You can distribute it back to see if you get the original. Okay. All right. So next problem, you have 3x cubed minus 6x squared. So again, 3x cubed is 3xxx minus 6 is 2 times 3 times xx. And notice from here, you can see that, well, they each have a 3. And I can take an xx out of both. Right, again, lowest number. So my GCF in this case is 3xx, so 3x squared in the front, and the leftover, I have an x leftover right here, I have the minus right here, and I have the 2 right here. So your final answer will be 3x squared times x minus 2. Okay. All right. So very much the same idea. You have 12ab plus 40a, 12ab plus 40a. Right. Now, if you want to, you can do the 12 and 40 on the side. So 12 is 4 times 3, and this is 4 is 2 times 2, and the 40 is 4 times 10, which is 2, and 5, 2. So only thing they have in common is the 2 2s. So GCF for the number is 4. So I know I have 4 in the front. Now look at the letters. They each have an a to the first power, which is good. Now the first term has b, the second one has no b, so which means I cannot take any b out. Okay, so look at what's left over. From the tree, we have a 3 left over, so that's in here, right? From the 40 tree from 40, we have a 5 times 2, which is 10. That goes right here. Okay. Now the b in the first b, I couldn't take anything out, so that b stays, and then I have the plus sign that's in there as well. So 3b plus 10, quantity times 4a. All right. All right. So now in part 4, we're supposed to factor out a negative GCF, right? So we start out x minus 1. Now, if you have noticed, all the GCF we have factored out so far are positive numbers. Okay, it is okay to factor out a negative GCF. Okay, basically you're just factoring out a negative number. Now you just gotta remember what happens when you factor out a negative number. Okay, so if you look at x minus 1, right? X minus 1, they absolutely have nothing in common, which means their GCF is 1. So technically you could write this as 1 times x minus 1. Okay, but in this case, what I would like you to do is, instead of doing 1, I would like you to do GCF of negative 1 instead. So which means you need to factor out a negative 1. Okay, so all I'm doing is I'm making the GCF negative. So now you gotta remember, what happens when you factor out a negative? Okay, think about what happens when you multiply by a negative 1. When you distribute by negative 1, what happens? So think about negative 1 times what give you a positive x? Well, negative times negative is positive, so which means you gotta have a negative x here. Okay, keep asking the same question. Negative times what give you a negative 1? Well, anything times 1 gets itself, so which means negative 1 times a positive 1 will give you a negative 1. So essentially what happened here is, notice, you flip the signs when factor out a negative GCF. Okay, the signs will change. The signs will change. So with that being said, let's go ahead and look at the rest. You have a negative 3x minus 9. I can see that from here. My GCF in this case is going to be a negative 3. Right, because 3 goes into 9. So you have, negative 3 times what is negative 3x? Well, that's a positive x. Negative 3 times what give you a negative 9? Remember, sign switches, so this has to be a plus 3. Okay. On the last part, you have 8a squared b plus 14ab squared. Looking at 8 and 14, I can tell that 2 is the only thing that works. So I'm going to factor out a negative 2. And the letters does not, the way to deal with letters doesn't change. So I still have a AB. Right, where A and B, the lowest power is 1. So from here, I have negative 2 times what is negative 8? Well, a positive 8 is going to become a negative, so it's got to be a negative 4a. And the positive 14, right, the plus 14 is going to have to turn into a minus 7b. Okay? All right. Okay, the last part about the binomial factor. So this is again very similar to what we did earlier. You have 6x x minus 1 minus 5x minus 1. Notice we have x minus 1 right here. So that's gonna be our in this case we know we can definitely factor that out. So here we go. So you have x minus 1 in the front. And make sure you put parentheses around it. And we have the 6x minus 5 as leftovers. And we are done. Okay. Same thing for the part B. You have a parentheses b minus c plus d times b minus c. So notice the b minus c right here. Those are common. So factor that out. And you have the leftovers of A plus D as leftovers. And we put them into a different parentheses. Okay. All right. So now let's go ahead and step into grouping. So this is the rule for grouping. Grouping only works when you have 4 terms. Okay, and what you're going to do is, so step 1, you got to split into 2 groups of 2 terms. Step 2, GCF both. So you need to factor out the GCF. Both groups. Okay, so we'll stop right here for now. So let's go ahead and look at the first problem. Let's make sure we got a proper setup. You got 2p squared minus p minus 2p plus 1, and we definitely have 4 terms. Right, remember terms are separated by plus and minus signs? So we definitely have 4 terms. And then we're going to split this into 2 groups. We're going to split right down the middle. So what I'm looking at is the first group is a 2p squared minus p, and the second group is negative 2p plus 1. So from here, we're going to find the GCF of each group. Now I'm gonna assume we're all experts at finding GCF. So I know looking at 2p squared minus p, my GCF is p, my leftover is 2p minus 1. Now looking at the second group, right? Notice. Notice. I mean, I don't have anything in common, so only thing we could have is a plus 1, right? And but if you do that, you have negative 2p plus 1. Okay. Now this looks very familiar to what we just did with a binomial factor. The only issue is, notice we have 2p minus 1 in one parentheses, but we have negative 2p plus 1 in a different parentheses. And the difference between the two is that the signs are opposite. So this tells me if the signs are opposite, that means I have to factor out a negative factor. So instead of factoring out a positive 1, I actually need to factor out a negative 1, so I can switch the signs. If I factor out a negative 1, that means I have 2p minus 1 inside. And notice now we have the same. So from here, to finish grouping, we're going to factor out the binomial. So step 3, factor out binomial. So I have 2p minus 1 on the outside, and my leftover is p minus 1 on the inside. Well, okay. So same thing for the next problem, is the 6x squared plus 3x plus 4x plus 2. So I'm going to split down the middle and find the GCF of for both groups. The GCF for 6x squared plus 3x is 3x. And you have 2x plus 1 left over inside. The GCF of 4x plus 2 is 2. It's a positive 2. So I have 2x plus 1 on the inside. Notice you both have 2x plus 1, which is what we need. So factor that 2x plus 1 out is my binomial factor. Now I'm left with 3x plus 2. Okay. Now, same idea, right? Notice the part C, the powers are larger, but it doesn't matter. As long as it's factorable, it'll be okay. So you got b to the 4th power plus b cubed minus 4b minus 4. So again, split down the middle. So we're going to find the GCF for the first group. That's going to be b cubed times b plus 1. Okay, remember, anytime when in doubt, distribute. Distribute to see if you can get the original answer back. Now, the second group, negative 4b minus 4, I think this one's pretty obvious that the signs are different. So we need to factor out a negative 4, then you have b plus 1. So b plus 1 and b plus 1, the two parentheses are the same, which means we can now factor those out. B plus 1 and b cubed minus 4. Okay. All right, part D and part E, right, gave people a little bit of trouble just because if you just split them down the middle, you're going to notice that you don't have any common factors. So in this case, you have to move things around a little bit. So what I did is I started out with ay plus bx plus by plus 8x. So what I did is I switched these two. Okay, remember, when you're adding, you can switch. So now I have ay plus by plus bx plus 8x. So now when I split down the middle, I have y times a plus b. And the second half, I have plus x times b plus a. And notice a plus b, b plus a are the same. So I have a plus b on the, factor that out, and I have y plus x. Last problem, same issue. You group together the quantity with the x squares. So what I did was I have 2x squared plus x squared m plus 6m plus 12. I can factor out x squared. I have 2 plus m. The second group, I could factor out a 6. Now I have m plus 2. So 2 plus m same as m plus 2. So I have 2 plus m times x squared plus 6. Okay, so this is grouping. So hopefully you won't have any trouble with this. If you have any questions, please let me know. Thanks. Talk to you later.